The movie kicks off with Bobby and Stig driving together to the local diner, and while Stig gets them a table, Bobby walks over to the bank across the street to get himself a safety deposit box. Once he is handed the keys to his new box, he joins Stig at the diner and reports that the bank can easily be robbed. As they begin planning, they notice the arrival of a couple of police officers. Excusing himself then, Stig visits the washroom and sets off the fire alarm, causing the diner to be evacuated. He throws his lighter at the diner's stove, effectively setting the place on fire before leaving with Bobby. They had been in Mexico a week ago, where Bobby had met drug kingpin Papi Greco to learn about Little Toro's skimming activities that had led to his beheading. Handing over a bunch of passports to Papi, then Bobby had expected to be paid in a stash of narcotics, when instead Papi had chosen to pay him in cash. Insisting upon the narcotics whenever Papi can hold up his end of the deal, Bobby returned the money and asked Papi to keep the passports as well. On their way out of Papi's farm, Bobby informed Stig about their friend's fate. To avenge Little Toro's passing, Stig had then suggested robbing a bank in Texas funded by Papi. Knowing that the bank receives cash amounting about $3 million every fortnight, Stig had expressed confidence in their abilities. However, they had soon been taken in upon their return to the U.S. to be questioned about their Mexican visit. While Bobby refused to answer any questions in the absence of a lawyer, DEA agent Deb Reese had no luck with Stig either. Speaking privately to DEA agent Jessup, Bobby admits that he hasn't hidden the narcotics anywhere simply because he did not receive any. Deb joins the discussion even as Jessup asks about getting Little Toro to switch loyalties. Bobby then lies and says that he was close to cracking him. It is then revealed that Bobby is an undercover DEA agent himself and his superior. Jessup gives him the next 2 weeks to get Little Toro on their side, threatening to pull him off Papi's case if he isn't successful. With Deb later that evening, Bobby informs her about Little Toro's passing. As his mistress, he asks her to keep the secret from Jessup and states another way to convict Papi instead. By robbing Papi's bank in Texas, he says that they can gain access to his private safe deposit box to nab him for tax evasion. The next morning, he meets Stig and the two then stake out Papi's house from across the street. Witnessing him handing over a suitcase to one of his men, they follow the guy to his destination where Stig walks into the diner and Bobby heads to the bank. After raising the fire alarm there, the two walk out of the place together. Later that evening, Bobby lets Deb know about their plan to rob the bank the next afternoon and arranges for her to be there to arrest Stig. While he then heads home, Stig is elsewhere meeting with Lieutenant Commander Harold Quince. It is revealed here that Stig is an undercover Navy SEAL with his eye on Papi as well. As per the plan laid out by the Admiral, Harold states that they will be able to run cross-border ops on Papi and several other cartels using the $3 million from the bank robbery. Hence, unbeknownst to each other, Stig and Bobby have been sharing a target while being undercover. The next afternoon, they arrive outside the bank but head over to the police station next door wearing masks. At gunpoint then, they force the cops into their cells to avoid being chased later. Once the police are securely locked, they get everyone at the bank to obey their directions to calmly wait out the robbery. Forcibly grabbing the keys to the safe deposit vault from the manager, Stig proceeds to place explosives to burst them open. Having expected the cash they seek in only a couple of them, he is taken aback when he finds that all the boxes are stuffed with cash. Asking him to grab all of it, Bobby helps wheel the cash out of the bank. Speaking to the security guard then, Bobby asks him to ensure that none of the patrons get caught in the possible gunfire outside before handing over the key to free the cops. Expecting Deb with a unit outside, Bobby is shocked to see the street completely empty, which lets them easily load up all the cash and get on their way without a problem. Stig pulls up in the desert once they are far enough away from town and the two wonder how much money they have escaped with. Realizing that all of it cannot belong to Papi, Stig pulls his gun on Bobby just as he is about to do the same. Instead, Stig shoots him in the arm and is surprised to notice Bobby's DEA badge. Stig then takes off with the cash and leaves Bobby behind. Meanwhile, Earl is at the bank refusing to believe that the manager could do nothing to stop the robbery. Outside, he notices the state of the diner and refuses to believe that the fire was a coincidence. Having counted the money they escaped with, meanwhile, Stig reports to Harold about now possessing more than $43 million. Asking his team to transfer the cash to their base, Harold then reprimands Stig for not finishing Bobby off to prevent the operation to be traced back to him. Somewhere in the desert, Bobby comes across two guys in a buggy and holding them at gunpoint, he grabs their ride on his way out just as Stig gets to the desert with Harold. Not finding any evidence of Bobby's passing, Harold attempts to have Stig abducted. However, his quick reflexes get Stig to react in time to flee Harold's wrath. He is chased through the desert though by Harold and his team, but he manages to hoodwink them to escape. Meanwhile, Bobby arrives at a veterinarian clinic to have his wound checked out. When Dr. Ken asks him to leave because he doesn't have the expertise to deal with a gunshot wound, Bobby admits to being a DEA agent and threatens to have him taken in for his known narcotic dealings. Borrowing the clinic's van later that evening, Bobby follows Deb as she gets to a hotel to meet her partner. Catching up to her at the elevator, Bobby learns that she had been at the bank with a team that afternoon. She insists that she was on time and wonders if the robbery happened earlier than it was decided. Informing her about being shot by Stig, Bobby then asks her to do another background check on him before heading over to Stig's apartment himself. Earl, on the other hand, has somehow followed Bobby's trail to Dr. Ken's clinic. Refusing to spill details about Bobby and the gunshot wound he treated, Dr. Ken ends up getting his knee blown by Earl, breaking into Stig's apartment. Meanwhile, Bobby is surprised to hear Stig on the answering machine, urging him to receive the call. As it turns out, Stig has been waiting for him from a sniper post across the street. Despite having worked together for a while, both of them find it difficult now to trust the other's intentions. While they struggle to come clean, Stig notices the arrival of Harold's hit squad and promptly asks Bobby to disconnect their call and hide. Immediately calling him back on his mobile instead, he then offers to guide him to safety just as the men reach the apartment's entrance. Keeping a close eye on their movements, Stig helps Bobby continuously change his hiding place across the apartment to avoid detection. Trusting Stig works out in Bobby's favor till he gets cornered, which leaves Stig to take matters into his own hands and shoot at his former teammates. Amidst the chaos, Bobby slips out and successfully escapes. Jessup, on the other hand, is held at gunpoint by Earl and his team. While Bobby walks up to Jessup's place, he learns from Deb that she cannot find any startling information on Stig. Asking her to continue looking, he says that he intends to admit the truth to Jessup to find out whose money it is that they have robbed. Walking into Jessup's hostage situation then, Bobby sees Earl as he shoots Jessup. Leaving him in pain, Earl speaks to Bobby, intending to find out how he knew to rob the bank. Despite being threatened by Earl's gun, Bobby repeatedly feigns ignorance about the money. When he asks Earl about his identity, he refuses to give him an answer and instead accuses Bobby of being a dirty cop responsible for his boss's end. Careful not to leave his fingerprints, he then uses Bobby's gun to ruthlessly end Jessup's life, threatening Bobby of this accusation becoming the reality of his life if he fails to return the money. Earl dismisses him. Desperately seeking answers, Bobby meets Poppy the next day and demands to know exactly whose money they stole. Stig gets there just then and forces Poppy into his car's trunk. Bobby and Stig argue over who gets to abduct him, but eventually leave the place simultaneously to avoid being attacked. They compete with each other through the desert while Poppy gets tossed around in the trunk until they crash. Bobby and Stig then fight it out with each other and vent their anger to eventually calm down and discuss their options once they correctly introduce themselves. Stig assures Bobby that while his superior planned everything, knowing about Bobby being a cop, he himself had no idea about it. When he insists that he had simply followed the plan to reach Poppy, they decide to team up like before to achieve their common goal. In a shocking turn of events though, Poppy reveals that he doesn't keep any of his money in the bank that was robbed. He says that all that money belonged to the CIA instead, as a cut from Poppy's revenue, in return for which their planes safely transport his goods across the border. Interrupting the questioning session, Deb is shocked to know that a narcotics kingpin is tied up in her garage. She is further shocked upon learning that the CIA followed the money trail and ended their superior. Suddenly then, the house is attacked by Harold and his team while Poppy grabs the chance to disappear. Amidst heavy gunfire, Bobby, Stig and Deb also manage to escape to safety. Poppy meanwhile threatens a stranger to get their car and phone before contacting his people with information about the car that Bobby escaped with. While Bobby ponders how Harold got to Deb's place, their car is suddenly smashed into, and they are soon surrounded by Poppy's men. At Poppy's farm, after receiving a beating and being threatened by a bull, Stig admits that the money is at the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station in Harold's safe. Informed about Earl's arrival then, Poppy meets him and is threatened to return the money or ultimately lose his flourishing business. Intending to double-cross Earl to keep the money for himself, Poppy gives Bobby and Stig 24 hours to cross the border and retrieve the money. To ensure that they do not take off with it themselves, he threatens Bobby with Deb's life. After a grueling trek across the border, they steal a car and head over to meet one of Stig's contacts. Equipped with weapons, they proceed to the naval base where they crash through the entrance. While being chased, Stig drops Bobby off at the command building to get to Harold's office while he continues ahead with the rest of his plan. While he demands to speak to the Admiral, Bobby gains access to Harold's office. Stig admits the whole truth to the Admiral, but he refuses to act upon it to save the integrity of the Navy. Meanwhile, Harold returns to his office and gets attacked by Bobby, who has figured out that he is Deb's partner. At gunpoint then, Harold opens his safe and it is revealed not to contain the cash that Bobby seeks. Forcing Harold to spill the truth, Bobby learns that he and Deb plan to grab the money for themselves. Realizing that he must have given Deb the money for safekeeping, Bobby exits his office even as Stig is escorted out. Grabbing a spare uniform for himself on the way, Bobby gets to the kitchen and kicks a gas pipe before setting off the fire alarm. Getting into the walk-in freezer to save himself, he then blows the place up. Easily able to get out in uniform, he sees Stig being taken off the base. Meanwhile, Poppy learns that Deb set Bobby up, and also that the money isn't on the base like Stig believed it to be. He contacts Bobby to let him know that he is out of time to save Deb. For the sake of Deb's life, Bobby lies to Poppy and insists that he has the money. Having realized her fate, however, Deb moves her ring to her thumb just before Poppy ends her life. Devastated by her loss, Bobby waits for Stig, who finds him later that evening. Learning about the missing cash and Deb's end, an enraged Stig decides to go to Mexico to confront Poppy as well as Harold. Meanwhile, Bobby heads home to find Deb's corpse there. Noticing the ring on her thumb as their private signal, he rushes over to a motel they used to frequently visit. Looking through their room there, he finds the cash and immediately calls Earl to take him up on his deal. The next morning, Stig is at Poppy's farm asking him for help with eliminating Harold, who attacks just then and reveals that Stig made a deal with him to end everyone on the farm if he wants the money. When Harold suggests that they end Stig and divide the money instead, Poppy finds it to be a better option. However, Stig insists that he will end up being betrayed just as Earl arrives at the farm. Forced to open his car's trunk, Stig's lie about having the cash is discovered when it is revealed to be empty. However, he is saved by Bobby getting there just in time with the cash. Handing over the car's keys to Earl, Bobby's deal with him deems him and Stig to be free men. Walking away with a reluctant Stig who does not want Earl to get all the money, Bobby then blows the car up. Beginning with shooting at Poppy and Harold, the two then attack all the men gathered on the farm. Earl and his team pursue them along with Harold, and a shootout ensues as Bobby and Stig make their way through the farm's bulls. Stig takes out the pilot of the CIA's helicopter before joining Bobby in the barn where Harold and Earl are tracking them. Things come to a standoff eventually when Earl insists they all get into a deal for everyone to keep their lives. He also announces that the CIA has a similar stash in multiple other banks, implying that this loss isn't too much for them. Finally burying their differences and choosing to trust each other, Bobby shoots Harold while Stig shoots Earl. Finding Poppy then, they take him out as well. While leaving the farm though, Bobby shoots Stig in his leg for payback. A while later, the two stake out another bank which they suspect has the CIA's money when Bobby hints at having kept some of the cash for themselves. Thanks for watching until the end. Feel free to watch some of my other videos, and as always, have a good day.